This video will help you get started with LEGO maps in Dungeons & Dragons. LEGO maps are super cool in Dungeons & Dragons for multiple reasons. They are surprisingly cheap alternative to buying more expensive 3D printed or even sculpted tiles that you can get elsewhere. They are already colored. You can have a lot of fun like building up your maps and not only playing in them, but also they have the right level of detail versus abstraction to get your players involved. And I'll tell you how to get started in this video. When I first started using LEGO in my Dungeons & Dragons play, I started with these tiles. These tiles are modular terrain that you can just click together to build sets like this one. And I think it's great to give your players a little more visual clues of what's going on and help them be more tactical and more strategic in their battles. As I discussed in an earlier video, it's not necessarily the best place to start with these tiles, as you need a lot of them if you want to build bigger sets. And I think that having bigger sets is great to be able to use distance in a tactical and strategic way in your maps. I don't think using map tiles as a starting point is super necessary. You can use a scatter instead, like the ship, like all these small details on the map, and just print out regular grid or buy one online. They're probably way cheaper than building them from LEGO. But for me, I like that this gives a great visual reference of difficult terrain, like these swamp style tiles or like water and all this stuff. I'm not super happy with the color scheme and the design of all these. I got the inspiration for these through the LEGO and Dungeons & Dragons Ideas collab a few years back, and there were a lot of entries with modular terrain, and also through the subreddit LEGO Dungeons & Dragons or LEGO D&D that has also a lot of inspiration. And I tried to combine the best ideas that I could find. I like the sizing of these, and let's start with this. So these are not exactly 1-inch tile sizes because LEGO, of course, is standardized, and it's not standardized on inch. But I think I have I have a minifigure here that's regular Dungeons & Dragons size, and as you can see, it fits quite nicely on this grid as well. The grid is a little larger than a 1-inch grid, but it still works if you have existing miniatures or you have existing terrain or scatter or anything like that. And all the 3D printable models that you'll find online, probably 1-inch sized. So that will work with this 4x4 stud design. There are some micro-sized scalings where they use a 2x2 inch design for the grid. I started thinking I would use that to save money, because of course if it's smaller you need less pieces. But ultimately I decided against it because one of the reasons I wanted to bring LEGO into my Dungeons & Dragons maps and battle setup was that I wanted more impressive sets. I wanted to have more impressive builds. And the first thing I looked into wasn't actually LEGO, it was 3D printing. We have a 3D printer at work, so I could theoretically print out stuff, but it takes forever. And of course, they're super cool models, but yeah, it takes a lot of time. And then there's, of course, something like, I don't know if it's called Dwarven Forge, I think, where you can buy pre-made or ready-made dungeons and tiles and all that stuff. There's some magnetic attachment ideas floating around, so super cool concepts, but they are pricey as well. What I found is they're even more pricier than for me using LEGO, because LEGO is so versatile. And I think one good example of that is actually if you look at these gray tiles. So I got most of the pieces through the LEGO Heroica sets, which have a lot of these, and I still have a lot of leftover parts, even though this is just a fraction of the gray pieces I've built. Building one of these gives you a dungeon, it gives you a street, like in this scenario, it gives you interior. It gives you a lot of flexibility by just using those. If you would have 3D printed them or bought ready-made ones, they are way more particular because they are so realistic looking. They are way more particular in how you can use them. So I decided on 4 basic pieces to start with, or 4 basic color schemes to start with. First, these gray ones. I got the most of them. Those are the most important ones for me because they can be used inside and outside, as I said. They can be used in a dungeons setup. They can be used as streets, as interior, so very versatile. And they also combine greatly with other pieces and other colors. So I got the most of them. Then I have these green ones, which are not present in this map setup. That's why I have a spare one here. I got the next biggest amount of those because exterior maps are usually bigger than interior ones. So I figured having more of these green ones would make sense. I'm not a huge fan of this color scheme. Those are the most standard colors you can get and therefore the cheapest. That's why I chose them, because when I started out, I didn't want to break the bank. Now I'm planning an upgrade. I've already ordered the pieces and I'll share with you guys like this color scheme I'm trying out. These green ones I have a lot of and they are great for, I think why they work good for a starting setup though, is they work great for grass, but also a woody exterior. They can work in a city as well as the wild outdoors. So I got a lot of those. And then I have these brown pieces, tan and reddish brown, I think the colors are called, which are nice for interior rooms like taverns or tavern rooms, but also to give an outdoor map a lot more texture is the wrong word, a lot more versatility. I think those are all the pieces I got for those. And then I have these sand colored pieces with a tan, and I need to look this up, but I think sand colored works fine in this regard. And I use them mostly for the outdoors as well, but I think they would work inside as well. So yeah, got a few pieces of those. And then of course these water pieces. And all the water pieces I have are present here. Ignore this one. This is something special to this map, so it's not part of the regular setup I have. But as you can see, these are the regular ones. My campaign doesn't run on water. It's not a seafaring campaign, so I don't need a lot of water pieces. But again, same thing as with the green ones, I don't love the color theme. And I got an upgrade planned and pieces already ordered, and we'll try them out together if you like. So having some water really helps break up a scene and make it so size doesn't matter that much. I've read this on Reddit when I've posted a photo of a map design of mine, that somebody mentioned, don't you miss the sizing of regular maps? I thought a lot about this, and this is why I made some adjustments to my setup. I've made these swamp tiles to make difficult terrain, movable area, like an area that the PCs can move in, but make it more difficult, so it's like a soft border to a map. And I have these water ones, bridges that can go with them, but to be choke points, to be also limit the movability on a map, to make it feel bigger or make it more difficult to get around without the size restraining it too much. There are ways to go about it, and I also have played a lot with leveling these maps, not having them laid out flat, because that's one of the downsides of this design, is it's very flat, and I'll share ideas on how to get elevation into this in future videos. As a starting point, I think ignore these ones, that's why I put them at the back here. I think as a starting point, these colors work very well, and I've been able to build every map I wanted with these tiles. Let's talk about tile sizing a little more. I'm going with a 4x4 stud design per 5-foot square. I've got only 2 sizes of these map pieces, these terrain pieces. So there's the 2x2, or if you call it in studs, 8x8 design. That's my regular size. I got the most of these. I think it's very versatile. You can still have some shapes with it, but it's not too flimsy, having everything in singular form factor. But for me, it hit the right price point as well. And I think that's important if you think about building this out. You have hundreds of pieces of each type. Price, even cents, come into play very fast. The 8x8 plates are, for me at least, a good price point. There are 4x8 plates that are even cheaper, and you combine 2 of them. That's what I did for the water, where I didn't use 8x8 blue ones because they were very expensive, but rather 2 4x8s, which work great, and you don't see it if you cover it up with the flat tiles. Even the big ones in gray and tan, like I'm using here, relatively cheap, and you can get them around like $50 up to $1, depending on where you get them, where you live in the world, of course. For me, that's an okay price point. Having bigger ones, either you're combining more of these plates and then it doesn't really make sense to combine them too much and have these big ones that aren't as flexible, or you're getting bigger plates, which are way more expensive. And then, of course, I have these half plate or these 1x2 size, so it's half of the bigger plates, and I have these to break up the squarishness, if you want to call it that, of the design. I don't want my maps to be square or rectangular. I want them to feel more organic, and that's why I have these half ones to break it up. You can see it here in the color scheme as well. It's not these 2x2 squares combined, but rather more flowy, and I like that. That's why I got some of the half. So basically, as a rule of thumb, I would say I have half the amount of the half ones as I have of the full ones. Only water, I have more of the half ones because I was thinking about building more rivers. And so I figured that using more half ones would make sense for that. Talking about price and size, these bricks, like the 2x1s with a hole, super cheap in this color as well. That's why I chose dark gray. I think the dark gray really works well in the setup because I'm even looking at the size, and think about this, your players will mostly sit on a table, so they'll not see it from the top, but rather from the side. So they'll see the sides the whole time. You'll see the sides the whole time. That's why I chose a color that's not as bright or as colorful to not take away from the map design. And these are very cheap. You can get them in bulk basically everywhere on Bricklink. It's a very good idea to get them on Bricklink as well. They are, I think, 10 cents, at least in Germany, on Lego Pick a Brick right now. And you can get them for 2 cents anywhere else, and you'll need hundreds of them. It can make a big difference between $20 and $100 for 1,000 of them. I don't know. So it can make a huge difference. One thing I'm not very happy with, and I'm experimenting with right now, these connector pieces. And the reason for that is I got them used and not new, which is something I would not recommend, because even though they were in okay condition, they don't stick to the right side, and I want them to. So the reason I went with them, I want to share my thought process here with you, so you don't go down the same rabbit hole as I did. My thought process was that it is a good idea to be able to click them together very quickly. When you build these out and you want to move them or you want to change stuff, having these be very easy to click together like this helps with, they are very sturdy. That's a reason for this build as well. You can throw them around. So anyways, that's why I chose them. But as I just showed you, they are very easy to pull out. So in this scenario, it pulls out the wrong side, and it pulls out the wrong side the whole time, more often than it stays in. So the way to get them apart is by breaking them apart, which, let me grab some more so I don't need to take this to break this apart the whole time. So the way is not to pull them apart because, as I said, they'll stick to the wrong side, but rather to break them apart. But even that gets pulled out. So I'm experimenting with other setups, but this is the way I went. You can of course take the long ones, but then it's harder to push them together. That's why I need more experimenting on this. They are also very cheap to get, and again, these pieces are probably the cheapest you'll get in this whole setup. A good starting point, having these sizes. As I said, you can push them together very easily and build out a big map. For the topping, and I'll break one apart. So as you can see, they are hollow on the inside. I didn't want to make them heavier than they needed to. That's why I built them this way. As you can see, I have a tan colored top plate and a dark bluish gray colored bottom plate. The reason for the different colors and the tan one on top is that I have these cracks to make it less chessboard-like. And I wanted to have a color visible through the cracks that's different than the cover color. So you have something like a dirt underneath and then the cover on top. As you can see, I have the tan colors for most of my setup, except for the interior ones and the sand ones, because for the sand ones, I didn't want to have tan for the inside as well, because it would look boring. And for the inside, it didn't make sense to me to have this tan, dirt-colored interior tiles. So yeah, for them, I went with another color. The first thing I decided when I mocked them up, I was thinking about 4x1 of these tiles and 2x2s. But I figured that getting more of a singular brick is way cheaper than having a lot of different ones. That is why I redesigned them with these 3x1s, because then you just need 4 to make a full circle. And I think they work as well. As I said, they are way cheaper to get. So again, depends on your budget, I guess. Getting a lot of these half-rounded ones and these rounded ones, I think it would have made sense for me to get more in the first try. I've bought a lot more since then, just to throw them in other designs as well. So for example, I have these stairs, and for stuff like these stairs as well, it makes sense to just throw in these little things everywhere, or on top here, to make it feel more part of the same design. So getting a few more doesn't break the bank. They cost 1 or 2 cents in these primary colors. There are colors, of course, that are way more expensive. And as I said, I'm experimenting with new designs, new colors, and I'm not looking too much on the budget as I did with the first try, because when I first tried this out, I wasn't sure if it would work and if I would use them. So I didn't want to spend too much money. But now that I'm certain of using it, I'm willing to spend a little more. Those are the basic pieces that you need to build this. I've decided against the design with fixed walls. There are a lot of designs online that have fixed walls, and I didn't get this with 3D printed ones as well, because as I said, players are sitting on the table and they're looking from this, not from the top, but from the sides. And so it makes it harder for them to see stuff. So I've built these walls. Let's just detach this one. I've built these walls, and they come apart the same way as the tiles do, and just to tell players that it's an end of the map. So, for example, in this scenario, I want to tell them that this end and this end are their limits, where they can't go any further, while in this direction they can go off the map, and in this direction they can as well. So these swamps back here are just an indicator of it's getting difficult to go down here, and then probably water will start soon after. But the city is in this way, so they can actually run away from the battle. And I'm designing my battles always with an option for my players to run away, because I always planning a battle to be super hard or deadly even, because like using D&D Beyond ranking systems, because I am noticing that if my players are very lucky in their rolls, they'll just kill monsters way too easily. And I want to have them, like, the best battle for me is something where at least one player is down and 2 players are really struggling, don't know if they can win, and their last strike before they would go down, they finished the enemy. I love this tension and the relief it gets, like after they finish off a boss or even other enemies. I love this good hero story that gets out of that. And so I always plan for my players to have an option to leave the battle. Because I don't want to kill them off, I think that's mean, but they need to be smart enough to know when they are losing and run away, and don't bet on me just making the fight so they can always win. So that's why I have these walls in place to know you can't move in this direction, or you can, but you have these doors in there. And also doors to have multi-room setup. So a lot of my maps have different rooms that they can get into, because it's great for adding enemies later on. If you notice your fight is too easy and you have multiple rooms, you can add enemies to a room that they have not come to balance it out, because I'm not running a super tight ship in my campaign, so some players might not cancel on a very short notice, or maybe a friend wants to join on a short notice and I'm never turning them away, because I think that having fun at the table is more important than story continuity, at least for my games. So that's why I need to balance fights a lot on the go. Having multiple rooms really helps with that. So this is my basic setup. And then of course I'll throw in scatter, pre-made ones by Lego, or building these little scatter pieces. And one thing I noticed is your players always expect all details in the map to be part of the scene. That's an error I made when I first used a Lego map for a Dungeons & Dragons session, and I included this skeleton in a corner hanging there, because I liked the vibe of it and I thought that it looked cool. But immediately my players went there and said, why is someone dead here? Like, what's the mystery around it? And suddenly they focused on the skeleton that was just propping up the scene. So from that on out, I decided that everything that is included in the scene that is visible there is part of the scene and they can interact with. So these barrels, they can hide in, they can loot them, they can open up stuff. So for example, in this, you can break away the mast of the ship. They can go inside here. Everything's interactable. And I think that's a great rule for non-battle maps as well. I've built a room for my last session. They had a time crunch and needed to investigate that room. And I built in little details that they could discover by just looking at the room and actually moving themselves, like the heads around and looking into things. And I could then time this out by making them make checks. When they discovered something as a player, I let them make checks to see how much of that the character would understand. So for example, I think I broke the fireplace. Oh yeah, so I broke this off already, but let's take this one instead. So for example, there is this little window and the cup is there. But of course, if you open the cup, there's nothing inside. So it still needs a medicine check or an investigation check or whatever you want to actually understand what this is about. I don't like scenes where the players just roll to be smart or just roll to find stuff and I just tell it to them. And that's why I love Lego in that instance, that they can just, as a player, find stuff and experience stuff. So for example, there was this fireplace, I already broke it apart. But as you can see, there are these white pieces here, which are odd in a fireplace. And so they were actually parchment that somebody burned. Even the color choices are particular in my sets. And as you see, we can always take stuff apart. I'm building everything modular, and I would recommend that to you as well. For example, I built these because I needed more walls in that room for discoverability, and I don't think that reusing them makes a lot of sense because they are very particular to the scene they were in. But with other stuff, it totally makes sense, like the scatter, for example, to make it clickable so you can adapt on the fly. For example, you'll probably have sessions where the players go somewhere else where you didn't expect them to. And with this modular design, you can just throw together a map very fast and have the players enjoy a battle, even if it's not intricately planned out. I hope this overview on how to get started with maps for Dungeons & Dragons, with Lego maps for Dungeons & Dragons, helped you get your journey started. Leave your questions in the comments, so I'll answer them in the comments, but also do more videos on this topic if you're interested in. And I'll see you in the next one.